I believe it's harder to be an entrepreneur when you have something that'll catch you if you fall. I already have my bachelor's degree. I was making $110,000 a year before I started my business, and I decided to let go of all that. I saw my boss. I had a boss at the time. He had a BMW. Super stressed. Extremely stressed. This is the top guy at the company. This is the guy that everyone reports to. Old BMW, goes into work, gets calls from his wife. He looked miserable. So I looked at him like, if this is the best that I can do in my life, what a shame. I could do better than this. I think every single answer that you need in this whole entire world is directly in front of you. You just have to be open to receive that answer. We're in a van, first and foremost. I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Brandon decided that it'd be a good idea for us to shoot a podcast in a van. So here we are today, shooting a podcast in a van. This is the first time we do this, okay, and definitely not the last time. But before I go ahead and I speak about the van too much, I'll let you guys speak about it. I'd like to introduce all of you guys actually. So Brandon Neal, sitting to my left. He is the owner and founder of Collective Technologies. Musa Kader is the owner and founder of Titanium Practices. And then we have Mr. Terence Bridges, a associate pastor over at what church again? The
Capital Community Church.
Capital Community Church. And I had your son on the podcast too. It was a great podcast, the one that we shot.
See, failure, a lot of people get emotionally rattled by failure. But failure is something that can actually push you to learn and get better.
Absolutely.
And so it's just how you want. Do you want to cry over spilled milk, or do you want to do something about it?
100%. I know you watched it. You told me that you watched it. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming onto the podcast. I know we have different ideologies and we have different viewpoints. All of us here own businesses, and then you are actually looking to get into business. Is that correct to assume?
Yeah. I'm realizing that a part of my American citizenship is being an owner of my own business.
Okay.
And now I was not taught that through school.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught to be an employee,
Yep.
not an entrepreneur. But through research, I'm realizing that that's really a part of what it means to be an American.
Okay.
So I'm ready to step up to the plate,
Yeah.
and become an entrepreneur.
So my father is somebody who I obviously love very dearly, and I respect everything that he says. He doesn't believe in entrepreneurship whatsoever. So it's almost very rare to see a father whose son wants to get into entrepreneurship who sees it this, I don't want to say late, but who sees it in this day and age. Because usually when somebody is glued to a generation, they're always going to be glued in that generation. So it's actually a huge accomplishment, in my opinion, that you're seeking to get into entrepreneurship and look into it. How has that been for you, by the way?
What?
Just getting into it has been difficult. Do you have any?
Well, I'm just literally getting started.
Okay.
I mean, but I think the shift had to happen first in thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Before
The mindset.
the action. Like, I didn't know.
Uh-huh.
Like, I was a kid whose parents worked Southwestern Bell, worked at Sears, Roebuck and Company. They weren't entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So going to school, getting a job at someone else's job,
Yeah.
that was the goal. Well, I married to a Jamaican
Okay.
whose father is an entrepreneur or was an entrepreneur. Carol, my wife, doesn't know anything of making mortgage payments
Okay.
because her father, as an entrepreneur, paid cash for everything. So that's a new experience. And, oh, by the way, he transitioned into entrepreneurship when he was about 60.
Okay.
So I'm 55, going on 56. I have no excuse.
Yep.
Now, my son, on the other hand, Justin, who you met, he's wired for entrepreneurship because he understands not from an American's perspective, but from a Jamaican perspective. You know, a Jamaican is known to have 5 or 6 jobs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of course, I met Brandon through being in the car business in the past. He transitioned over to being an entrepreneur. I said, I'm not an entrepreneur, Justin. You need to follow Brandon. He'll teach you the ropes. Mm-hmm. Well, why not me?
Well, I mean, I want to interject here because, where I hear him saying that he's never really been an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, I think he's always been an entrepreneur. He's never really actually recognized it. Because one of the things about being an entrepreneur is being able to first identify a problem. And if you can identify a problem, the second is, do I have the ability in which to solve that problem? Third, am I willing to go and step through all of the challenges it's going to take for me to solve that problem? And can I bring a group of people around solving that problem? Right?
I like that order.
That process is something that you've seen and experienced your entire life, because those are the same things that you did to me in my life, right? And it's really just going back and just now attaching the last thing to it. Can I get someone to pay me to do it?
Well, I think to be honest with you, where I'm currently working, I have a lot of other things to do other than what I'm bent to do. And so I'm looking more to focus and hone in on that bent and creating a business behind what I'm able to offer uniquely to others.
So what's that bend? What's that thing that makes you unique? What's that problem that you're solving? What's that thing that you have been uniquely designed to do that you feel God is calling you to do?
Well,
you're not already doing.
Yeah, well, there's one thing of doing it, but doing it in a different fashion, right? So instead of clocking in 9 to 5, it's doing it through other opportunities, podcasting, writing books, a whole host of things that my mind is just, what are these opportunities?
Yeah.
But first of all, seeing that that's not for someone else to do. That's my opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so, as I said before, I really didn't understand this whole thing about independent living. As a matter of fact, Abraham Lincoln mentioned something about America, and he talked about how that the Industrial Revolution that was just coming online when he was alive, he said, really, to work at a job and do one thing over and over and over, it's a hard sell here in America, because Americans would work long enough to get capital to start their own business. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that was my inheritance here as an American. So
yeah, I think from here, I guess, my family's probably been in America the longest of anybody in this room, and we came over to this country, during the potato famine, at least the Neal family, right? So that's how long we have been here in the United States. But immediately we became business owners. We moved from the New York area and moved down to North Carolina and started lumber mills and casket factories.
So Neal, I know you come from a background of business. I want to know, what's the biggest risk you have taken personally?
Everything. I bet everything on myself. And cashed out everything.
Who had to back it? Who was there to back you up?
I knew at the end of the day that my family, right, if push came to shove, would be there. But when I look at family, I don't look at it the perspective of just the people that are close to me. My friends, everyone.
Business is very different when you can fall back onto something. Mm-hmm. So if you had a job, like I have a degree, and Musa is a teacher as well. He's actually quite good at that. If you can fall back on it, then you always have the satisfaction of saying, okay, I can give up whenever I want. It's not go time all the time. So it's actually, I believe it's harder to be an entrepreneur when you have something that'll catch you if you fall.
Yeah, and I think I'll speak to this a little bit. My in my journey of attempting to become a successful entrepreneur, that I believe when I say I've risked everything, I mean, I've ended up sleeping in my car for weeks on end, having to go a week without a shower, not even having fresh, clean clothes, not even being able to afford McDonald's or 7-Eleven. And, I didn't have that option, right, in my mind that said I can fall back on my family or on a friend. I just had too much pride to ever ask somebody for help. That's not going to happen. I made it clear to myself that the buck stops with me. Either I become successful or I'm going to die trying. And when I'm in that mindset, I have nothing to lose. The things I was capable of achieving in a matter of 12, 14, 16 weeks, days, months is far superior to any of my colleagues, what they've been able to accomplish in the same time frame. It's not because they are more intelligent than me, they're more capable than me. It's because they don't have that same level of desperation and hunger that they had to face like I did out on the street, right? That's what's the difference between, I would say, a stable, comfortable entrepreneur versus somebody who has only one option to succeed. They don't have a backup, right? That's the difference in having somebody who is hungry for it. They want to be successful as fast as possible, but also they understand that if they fail, the worst outcome is that what? They're just going to be homeless again? Okay. If you're fine with that, you know you can take on the world.
Great point. And I think you kind of make the connection there. It's kind of you betting on yourself and you knowing that it really depends upon you, right? And I think just that whole idea of knowing that you have something to offer and believing that what you have to offer is unique, that can make a difference for yourself and others. I think that's the first hurdle. Because if you didn't believe in yourself, my God, the first time you don't have your McDonald's, I'm out, right? But there has to be some sense of belief. Well, getting back to what you said earlier, what I've learned through history, right? A lot of entrepreneurs were created here in America from Europeans because they were indentured servants. An indentured servant was a person who, hey, you pay my trip, you pay my trip to America, and I work your yard. That's Jamaican saying. Yeah. I work your yard for a certain amount of time under a contract, but I know at the end, I'll have my own yard, and I'll produce my own products. Okay, that's different than slavery. Slavery says, you come over here, you ain't never getting a piece of yard, and you're always going to work somebody else's business, and you never have yours. So I'm getting out of that.
Yeah. So you consider yourself as almost an indentured servant, but in a way where it's not contracted by a company, it's contracted by the government in a way where they're not actually telling you, they're acting like everything is fine when in reality we're kind of all slaves to this society. This is my opinion.
I'd say there's a quote my friend Shi Hao Kao, one of my friends from China who migrated over here to the United States about 15 years ago, told me something. He told me the best drug and the strongest drug, the most addictive drug, isn't cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, crystal meth, weed, you name it. It's a W-2 job. That W-2 job is the best prescription the government gives you to kill your dream. Slowly and surely, you're deteriorating who you are over time. And that is why a lot of people end up becoming that indentured servant to the government, ending up becoming that indentured servant to somebody else outside of their family, outside of themselves. It's all because you've been sold on a dream that in 20 years you can get a pension. In 40 years you can retire and get a 401k. By that time, what are you going to enjoy? Your back's failing, your eyesight's failing, your body isn't what it used to be. You won't be able to enjoy things like you could used to.
When I mention indentured servant, in contrast from a serf and a slave.
Yep.
Both didn't have hope that they could own their own property. But it's not just property for real estate. It's property so that in an agrarian society, I can create my own products and get into the market myself, right? Yeah. And not having that hope is where slaves have.
What does an agrarian society mean?
I'm sorry. Farming. Yeah.
Farming.
Farming.
But I think again, I'm in the transportation business, and this is kind of one of the things that if it was not for industrialization, right, which created the more forms of transportation, none of it was even needed, right? If we didn't have transportation, if we didn't go and leave where we were, we would have never even been having this conversation that we're having today. The only reason why we have this conversation is because you have been able to go somewhere else to see something that you don't have. And you're going to go and say, I want to be able to achieve it. Oh, wow, this guy has a farm that is more successful than my farm. How is he doing it? Right? And then that is where the basis of, again, where German society came from. And the reason why when the German society was so successful to be able to fend off the Romans and almost every other culture is because they were always focusing on how to do better. They didn't need to see anybody else's farm. They just simply said, can I make my farm better? And I'm just going to continue to do that. Transportation allowed for that, right? Us going into China, right? And going into other parts of the world. And so it was actually, and one of the reasons why I always think about my business and what I'm doing is my business is one of the biggest causes for the stuff that we're even talking about, right? If you didn't have transportation, if you did not have ships to go from point A to point B, you wouldn't be able to take slaves from Africa and bring them to the United States or take them to any part of the world.
Right.
Right? We have going to say is now it's also really at the end of the day a race to the bottom. Which, and actually what we're talking about, and if I'm looking at where life is really going, life is going to the point of where we are going back to where we came from pre-industrialization, right? Where we are going back to a family farm. We're going back to our own roots. But we have to be able to now do that in a bigger scale and work together with other farmers to go and say, hey, I am going to specialize in producing this particular crop because my soil, my conditions, my abilities can make that crop grow well. You can go and do those other ones. But to make that happen, we have to get to a bigger place in society, which is one of the biggest things what we talk about with religion, right? How do we do well with one another? How can we play nice in the sandbox? How can we go after the things that I want in the world and for what I want for the people that I know in my life, and to be able to do it where you're still able to do yours, which of course is the great place about why we have, and with a big difference between Germany and the United States, is the level of freedoms that the United States society has, which has influence from all of those different cultures, to go and say, hey, you do you. Right? You do you. You are allowed to do you. You're allowed to be you, and you can go and have your own customer base. And I can go and have my own customer base. And so I think one of the biggest things for you when we talk about, because I go and say, okay, well, what are you doing in the business world? You're a pastor. Pastors are one of the biggest and most protected businesses in the world. If you want to go and have the best tax codes and the best advantages in the business, you start a church. Right? And the next is, of course, a nonprofit. And then the last is creating a profit. But then you have to use and what makes this place the way it is because of the tax code in which that we have here in the United States. Right? It is the biggest incentive program in the world.
So when you say tax code and you say incentive program, are you saying like if you start a church or a nonprofit or something of that sort that you are able to relieve some of the tax burden that a citizen incurs every single year?
Eliminate completely.
Completely? Like how so?
So every single time when we're going and looking at anything, I mean, we talk about this van, right? Why do we buy it? Right? We bought it for the tax benefits that we can use for what we're going to do and to be able to use this and to put it into business use. Right? So we take a personal asset and we turn it into business use, and all of a sudden now we have all of these incentives in which to go and use this vehicle so that I even want to buy such an expensive vehicle.
I believe I read about that at some point. I think in the IRS tax code, it's called Section 179, if I can refer correctly. So
yes, it is actually. That's exactly
178 or 177, 179.
You know, Musa, he likes to be very specific, and he wants to go and make sure you know exactly what you want to go. We want the exact incentive that we want to be focused on. But no, you're right. Right? At the end of the day, every single American, if they really want to be successful in life, they should simply spend the time in which to read the tax code. If they understood our tax code and the incentives in which they do it, that's what my business does. We aggregate incentives from manufacturers so that consumers can best see what is the vehicle that's going to best benefit them financially into something that they like. Right?
You know, I think I was having a discussion with one of my good friends, Jacob, who is somebody who I work with all the time to build a couple of data centers in my own condo that we ship out to customers. And we were always talking about when it comes to the tax codes, you know, most people all their life, they're only taught about 60 to 75 pages of the entire tax code of the IRS. But most people don't even know the tax code is about 81,000 pages long. Hear that again, 81,000 pages, but you're only taught the first 60 to 80 about being a W-2 employee. What do you think the other 80-something thousand pages are for?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm curious, and I don't mean to switch topics here, but you said something earlier when you introduced yourself and you talked about entrepreneurship and about your father not really kind of going along or doesn't see the value. So number one, I'm curious as to what is he saying to you as an alternative? And then where did you pick this up? I mean, where is this coming
The
from?
internet is a very powerful tool. I'll go as far as to say that everything that I know I've taught myself, but I've also put myself at the right places at the right time, and I don't think that's by chance whatsoever. I think life works on frequencies. I think everything has a frequency, so I put myself on the same frequency as a lot of the people that are very successful and very good at what they do. And I learned how to speak like them. I learned how to be like them, and I was in the same room as them.
Okay.
So I learned what it's like to.
So how did you get in the
like
room
them.
with them?
I got in the room with them, actually, by first and foremost, I already have my bachelor's degree in cybersecurity. Graduated. I was making $110,000 a year before I started my business, and I decided to let go of all that, honestly, because I saw my boss. I had a boss at the time. He had a BMW. Super stressed, extremely stressed. This is the top guy at the company. This is the guy that everyone reports to. Old BMW, okay, goes into work, gets calls from his wives. He looked miserable. So I looked at him, I'm like, if this is the best that I can do in my life, what a shame. What a shame. I could do better than this. So at that point, I got a new job, and I specifically got it to make sure that it's online. Okay, so I had, and I don't know if Musa knows my setup or not. I had a laptop on the left side and a laptop on the right side. This is for the 9 to 5, okay, and this was for my regular job, for the business that I had started, right? This guy knows, and then you would, with one hand, you would have like 5% attention here, okay, tapping with your pinky finger, not even caring about whatever. Right, and then you would have 4 fingers here.
You know, we call these mouse movers, folks, software or hardware, just so that corporate won't find out.
Exactly. So really, I just had to open my eyes. I think every single answer that you need in this whole entire world is directly in front of you. You just have to be open to receive that answer.
So you were looking for something more, something better
I've
than
always
what
thought I was something more
than what you saw. The carrot, the end of the
Absolutely.
the carrot that was being offered to you through, I guess, corporate America. That wasn't enough for you.
Not at all.
And I can go and
I'm a very
piggyback.
greedy and a very humble guy at the same time.
Okay.
It's a weird combination.
And I can piggyback on what he says now. Okay, obviously, a lot years earlier, and so different experience. And you know, the internet was not as strong and had the ability in which to, you know, they always say that right, in developer speak, you know, it was the difference between a good developer and a bad developer, the ability to use Google. Right?
Yeah.
Google wasn't there when I was in my early 20s. And so for me, it was a matter of seeing the things that was going on, seeing exactly the same thing, the lives, the fruits, right? The stress, the frustrations, the negative feelings about the world. And I saw that was now becoming me. And that was what I ran from. I just really wanted to be able to love waking up in the morning. I wanted something that I could go and be proud of. I don't mind getting yelled at. That's all I did in the automobile business is getting yelled at, because all I'm doing is fixing other people's problems. That wasn't the issue. It was what was I moving toward? And was I being appreciated for all of the effort and the work that is being put forward? And now, fast forward this to now, everyone's talking about it. Friends of mine, they can't find good people to work for them.
I think that the very thin line, especially about being a man, of choosing your path is just being able to understand that you are appreciated wherever you're doing.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere appreciates what you do.
Yeah.
And it could be one person that'll be enough.
Yeah, and I agree. And I rather make less money and be in control of my schedule.
Yeah.
And know that the people that I serve respect it and love me for it, than to go to a job that when I am making a ton of money for my employer, going back to, I'm talking about Mercedes, right? I was making the most money of anybody in that service department, but I was paid the least. How's that fair? And I always told my kids, I'm like, there's nothing fair. Because then there isn't. Because you signed. That was your contract. You agreed upon that contract. And I said, well, that was before I showed my effort and my ability in which to produce results. I have proven that I can make those results. And now I'm not even getting the same contract as everyone else. That's not fair.
So Musa, right. You have how many jobs? You own how many businesses? Let me get that out.
I am currently majority owner and decision maker in 5 businesses.
Okay. So 5 businesses. And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 24 years old.
Okay. So, yeah, we need to unpack this onion like right here, right now. How did you arrive? Where did you get your entrepreneur thinking from?
Well, the best way for me to explain it is my whole life I've never really received any level of appreciation from my family and friends. It was very rare for me to get a compliment. Very rare for me to smile. So a lot of the things that kept me going in life was envy and hatred for everybody else in the rest of the world. It was more of a me versus the world mentality, kind of like the protagonist in anime shows, where it's always like Naruto, for example, is one of my favorite characters that I model myself after. When he was a kid, he was always spat on. He was always ignored, never hung out with, always called the monster, you name it, right? And later on, you find out in his adult life, he becomes the village hero, the hero of the village. And everyone loves him, and they try to take care of him, give him gifts, etc. I kind of see my life as a replication of the story of Naruto, and trying to become a better person who's always tried to prove things, except at this point in my life, I'm no longer relying on envy and hatred. I'm now realizing since about a few years ago what it means to love somebody, what it means to smile, what it means to just have happiness in your life by having good people around you that encourage you, tell you to go try new things. And I've been able to replace the envy and hatred with positivity and happiness through others. If I see other people smile, right, that inspires me to want to do better. It's infectious. One person's smile can blossom 20 more, but one person's hatred can destroy 20 more. It is a sword of it is a sword of bilateral power. One way you can destroy 20 people with you, the other way you can inspire 20 people with you.
I understand.